be broken in pieces. When the truth comes out, when the truth comes out, you can run, but you know it's ending.
Well, hey there, everybody. How are we doing? We are back for another week with JennX, Truth Be Told. As you know, John 8:32, one of my favorite verses, it literally tells us, you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. So, as you know, we like to get into things here where we are all about fact and not fiction. And I have to be honest with you guys, I went into this week thinking, I can't wait to do this week's podcast because I was going to do something fun and lighthearted and playful. I was even thinking about having my girlfriend from Rhode Island hop on with me and kind of have a little chat with her because she's a hoot. And I think when you guys join the two of us together, you're going to see that we're quite a riot. When the two of us get together, we're just all about a bunch of shenanigans. And she's just fun. However, here we are. And as you know, since January 6th, as a country, we have been dealing with everything that is going on in LA. Actually, it's not just LA. We've been dealing with all of the pushback with ICE and deportation and all of the things. And I have to tell you, I am kind of sad that this is the topic of subject to be talking about this week. But I also feel like it's irresponsible not to have the conversation. Some of the things that I think for me are the most sticking points and what I'm the most frustrated about is that immediately I want to say that we have become a nation who's essentially allowed the media, politicians, and hate to just divide and conquer us. And it has not been beneficial and it's not been helpful. And if you don't see the decline of our country and you don't see us falling apart, and I think when we even try to open up the dialogue for this type of conversation, immediately people go red and blue and start fighting and say, well, if this one wasn't doing that, and if this one wasn't doing that, at what point do you get to a place of breaking down the conversation and addressing it and finding a way for resolution? We've become a country without a sense of resolution. I was listening to some friends talk the other day, and a friend of mine posted online and just talked about the inability for people to sit down and have conversations. And I think that we've lost a sense of having a relational value because we're all doing this, right? We're all behind keyboards and cell phones and tablets and iPads and all the things. So nobody's connecting anymore. We don't have the ability to have that humanitarian factor where we're able to just vibe with one another. It's all about coming up with the next sensationalized thing to argue about that's online. And it's just, it's kind of driving me crazy because nobody can have a conversation anymore. And it's super frustrating. I will say that the one thing that I have found, everybody talks about AI and what a wonderful thing it can be. I work in real estate. AI is a big, big deal. It helps with marketing. It helps with photos. It helps with all the things, right? And for that benefit, I think it's wonderful. I also think it's the work of the enemy because it is so deceitful and it can create things. It can create conversations, images, all kinds of things that you see people posting. And what is happening is because so much information is readily available at the snap of a finger on the internet, we immediately hear something or see something. And instead of investigating to make sure it is true and factual. So see, here's the difference. In the 70s, if a reporter took a photo of something, what he photographed was what it was. I mean, he had to take that film out. He had to go develop it. Nowadays, you can Photoshop anything. Guys, look, I'm a size 10. I can Photoshop something and make you think that I'm a size 4. And it's crazy to me that that's possible. Let me turn this down because we don't want to be dealing with that. We don't want to hear those kind of noises. Anyways, it's, it's crazy how we can deceive people with the click of a button and with Photoshop and AI and all the things. If you don't think that the government, and if you don't think your politicians, and if you don't think that people online do not have an agenda and are not doing that with you, you are highly mistaken. For instance, there was a gal on my Facebook page this morning and she posted something and I thought to myself, good grief, I just made a TikTok about this last week and they were using to incite this sense of anger about the deportation and how these kids were being handcuffed. And I thought, well, that is just insane to me because I thought to myself, oh my gosh, if that's really happening, I've got to see for myself. So I went in to look at it. And you know what's funny? Since posting that this morning, she deleted it. Anyway, she posted this picture of what appears to be a small child in a white coat with her hands behind her back. And she was detained by, I forget which sheriff department's office it was, but I remember when seeing it, I remember thinking to myself, good grief, how is that? And it was the Clark County Sheriff's. And I'll just read this to you. And it says a viral video is circulating online that's led to inaccurate claims, including the allegation that a CCSO deputy arrested an immigrant child. And so when you see this happened on April 1st. It was 7:15 p.m. And this is from the Clark County Sheriff's site itself. I'm reading it. And it says, there was a woman walking across the Northeast 99th Street on Interstate 5, a busy intersection with no crosswalk with moving traffic. People were calling because they were afraid. Initially, it looked like a child, and they were afraid that she was going to get hit, and there was no parent. There was nobody around. So anyways, eventually they pull over. She was not arrested. She was briefly detained. It turns out that she's an older woman. She's actually an adult. She's just a small person. She's an adult. She has mental health issues, and they were trying to deal with that. And this was a picture of her, like literally crossing the street. And then you see that they take those photos and they show the officer when he detained her and handcuffed her to, set her aside for just a minute. They have taken that and said, they're taking our children. They're kidnapping our children. They're arresting immigrant children. And then people are going nuts over this and then posting it. And this administration is evil. I can't believe this. How can they be doing this with a child? It wasn't a child. It was a 27-year-old woman with mental illness crossing the street. But someone decided to take that and they were like, now they're arresting the children. That's not what's happening. But I mean, do you not get tired of being lied to and being tricked? And but the problem is none of us want to have egg on our face, right? So even if the facts, even if it's presented right there in front of you, and you can see that clearly this is the same person that they thought was a child in the middle of the crosswalk, and the sheriff's department comes out. That was my first kicker, as I was like, this isn't ICE. You can see her standing next to a sheriff's car. That doesn't make sense. If we would only stop for a minute and do a little bit of investigating to recognize maybe everything we see is not the truth. Maybe we should see it for ourselves instead of just taking the word for someone who has a hatred for the administration or a hatred for Trump or all the things. And people that are interfering with these raids and interfering with ICE, I hear the conversation of, someone made the comment the other day about ICE wearing masks. Okay. And they were pissed off about that. And it's like, oh, what are they hiding for? What do they have to hide? Do you know why they're hiding? Because if you remember when they first started to go out to work on their, with their deportations, when they weren't wearing masks. You know what happened? Citizens, okay, getting involved went and took their face with facial recognition, found out who they were, found out where they lived, found out what their addresses were, all the things, their spouses, their children. There were people literally calling for these people to be unalived, posting pictures of their faces, pictures of their children's, and advertising their addresses. So if you don't think the government is not going to protect their federal agencies, and people were literally saying, see how you would like it if your children were kidnapped. Do you see how we're going off this cliff of lunacy and inciting all this, continuously inciting all of this violence and encouraging it and calling for it and asking for it? These men and women out there are doing their job. You may not like the job that they're doing, and you don't have to like what they're doing, but what they're doing is not illegal. I see all these videos where people are like, where's your warrant? You don't need a warrant. You don't need a warrant. And here's the other thing. Well, you gave no notice. You're just showing up and pulling these people from their houses. Listen, let me tell you, a lot of these immigrants have been in this country for years and years and years. They've evaded court cases. They haven't gone to court hearings. They've never filed for any paperwork. They're working under the table. They're being paid cash. They're not contributing to our society as far as taxes and everything else. And here's the thing. They're not going to get a mark the date. This is not a wedding. They're not going to get an invitation. It is ICE's job to come in under the radar to catch them. They're on the run. These are people that have been running from ICE for quite some time. And here's the thing. Previous administrations have set these people up to fail, to make them think that they were untouchable, and they weren't. They weren't. And so the fact that ICE is trying to get out and do their job, and that's all it is their job, and you're calling for these people to be unalived, you're calling for their children, of course they're going to be wearing masks. And then shame on you to flip the script and then start talking about the raids. I had so many people on my TikTok. They were, well, Donald Trump called, they're only causing riots because Trump called in the National Guard. No, riots were starting on January 6th. The National Guard was not called in until after the fact because of what's happening with these riots. And then here's the other thing. This is the crazy thing that always gets me going. It's funny to me that people have the audacity to sit here and say that these are peaceful protests and we don't understand. And the National Guard didn't need to come in and this is literally what they do. So here's this one guy where he goes on to say, he says, please show me where one business was looted and vandalized. Okay. So he's got all this going on, causing violence, asking for people to, put a stop to this. This is the looting. This is the violence. This is what you're seeing. So if you want to tell me that this isn't happening, and you want to tell me that this is peaceful protesting, and you want to tell me that this is about social injustice, these people are loading up. What are you talking about? Just look at that for yourself. These are business owners in LA that have worked their whole lives to support themselves and have these businesses. And you're saying it's a social injustice that ICE is here and taking away all of these immigrants. How is that helping any immigrant? Can you tell me that? How is that helping them? How is that preventing? Why is it every time LA is set? I mean, LA has been on fire so many times. Coincidentally, the government did something to shut down the water resources and almost all of the state literally burned down. You guys have a basketball game, you burn it down. There's rioting whenever there's anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, that you don't like, that you disagree with. There are so many ways to have peaceful protests. So many ways. I talked about this yesterday. I made a TikTok about it. And I was just like, I don't understand how these people are thinking. You've got Democratic senators themselves. You have out of, I think he's in Pennsylvania, Democratic Senator John Fetterman is slamming the Democrats for refusing to condemn the LA riots. This is anarchy and true chaos. This is someone from their own party. Governor Newsom is trying to have a presidential run in 2028. And right now, he and his mayor of LA are basically handing out masks and having these people go at it like they're just peaceful protesting. There are people that are literally getting hurt in the streets on both sides, on the side of the protesters and on the side of the police and on the side of ICE and the sheriff's department and anyone else that is coming in to try to help and slow this thing down and to just bring some sort of normalization to this chaos, because that's what it is. And I don't know why, when you bring in lawlessness, when you as a governor allow lawlessness, don't expect chaos to ensue, and then to go and try to blame it on the current administration for bringing in bigger dogs to come and slow this down and to stop it and put a stop to it. What else do you want them to do? Literally, the LA mayor said, stop deporting and allow us to remain illegal, and we'll stop burning the city down. Literally, she said, stop your deportations and we'll stop the riots. Are you kidding me? Then she gets on the news and it says, I can't believe it. They're looting. What did you think that they were doing? Singing Kumbaya and passing out flowers? Of course they're looting. They're burning shit down. There's people standing on top of cars with flags. Oh, and then that's another thing. They're also, listen, have pride in your heritage. You can have pride where you came from, but shame on you to break into this country because, essentially that's what you've done. You broke into our house. So you break into the country. You have your flag from the country that you were escaping from because it was such a bad place to be, whether it was Haiti, Honduras, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador. You're out there with your flags and you're waving them proudly and stepping on the American flag, catching it on fire, lighting it on fire, spitting on it, and spitting in the face of the government that is working to save and protect and preserve the rights of the American citizens that live here. Tell me, help me make that make sense. That is never going to make sense to me. Could you imagine if I crossed the Mexico border today with my American flag and said, F Mexico, and started lighting the Mexican flag on fire, waving my American flag? How long do you think that will last for me? I mean, how long do you think I'll be standing there without being taken down? Genuinely. Why is it that no other country would ever allow this behavior, but you want Americans to sit back and allow this? And then Governor Newsom goes on with his little photograph today and talking about what a travesty it is. And Trump sends in the National Guard and he's got them on floors, no food, no water. You know, I made this point earlier and I showed the picture that Newsom was using. Look, I know that that photo is from years past. That was actually a photo from the Biden administration when troops came back from Afghanistan. But neither here nor there, right? Because we can just use whatever propaganda we want to make our point as long as it's making our point. But here's the thing. He's using that to point out what a POS Trump is. Okay, well, like I said on my TikTok account, I said, okay, let's just play devil's advocate. Let's play your game for a minute, Newsom. So let's say that was the case. Let's say that that's exactly what Trump did. Brings in the National Guard, doesn't give a shit about them, just has them lying on cold floors and all the other thing, which, by the way, it's the National Guard. They've been in worse places. I've seen so many people from the military today going, look, if I'm inside a warm building, I'm okay. I'm doing okay when you compare some of the other places that I've been. But with that being said, he's trying to make it look like, oh, Trump brings them in and doesn't care about them. Okay, Newsom, well, you have the picture. You say that you know the federal building that they're in. I don't see you out there with any food. I see you out there with your press releases. I see you out there in front of your big ass microphone in front of your face, as it always is, because it's always a press opportunity. But why aren't you out there with your other government cronies? Why aren't you out there bringing them food? Why aren't you bringing them water? What are you doing that makes you any better? If that is what, as you say, Donald Trump did, which, you know, isn't the case. He did have to call in the military to bring in, to put some, you know, normalization to what is happening out there. And people don't understand why the other people in California are getting so irate. You can't go to work. You can't go out into the streets because they're all on fire. You're afraid to come out of your house because of what is taking place. There was literally video footage of people breaking apart sidewalks with sledgehammers. Oh, wait. Let me see. I think I have it here, because why should we just talk about it when I can actually, like, you know, show it to you?
This is really uplifting and positive. I know you guys have been getting a lot of bad news out of LA the past couple of days. Well, right, what you guys are watching right now, this is happening at the same time. This is I guess a community rock collecting event where they're kind of looking for, you know, collectible rocks. And yeah, I mean, this is also when you see people come together and share a hobby. This is. Oh wait. This
yeah.
really
Oh, wait. You know, I love his satire, because here's the thing. They're literally picking those boulders up and throwing them at the heads of police officers. You're going to tell me that that is peaceful. Now, look, does it mean that there are places in the city that are not organizing and that are peacefully protesting because they are upset and do not feel it is just and are disappointed and angry at what's happening with ICE? They have every right to do so. They have every right to do that. But the minute you bust open a store and a 7-Eleven and start stealing things or setting cars on fire or damaging property, millions of dollars of property have already been damaged, causing harm to police officers. Now you're just a criminal. You're just a common day criminal. You're not a protester anymore. You can't tell me that anything about that is peaceful. You just can't. It's not going to happen. And it's infuriating to me that you think that that's a justifiable way to handle things. How is that a civilized America? I don't get it. And then let's just talk about the senator from, is it Minnesota? I think it's Minnesota. Kaylee Her. She was an illegal immigrant. She was an illegal immigrant who falsified documents and became a senator. She literally said, I'm illegal and I'm breaking the law. That's a problem. Minnesota state law, you have to be a resident. You can't just become a senator because you want to be and you're not an actual citizen of the United States. When does the Democratic Party start to understand that they are not above the law? They are not above the law. They're just not. But they create all this insanity and chaos, and it's so exhausting. So exhausting. I saw something else here today that I was going to share that just made me just think to myself, like, you know, when you're talking about the National Guard and everybody getting so angry about the National Guard coming in because they don't understand that that's just, you know, why would we need to do such a thing? Do none of you remember when Waltz brought them in to his communities during COVID? You don't? Let me refresh your memory for you. Let me just show you what that was like for the people in where he lives.
They just keep coming.
Those were people that were wanting to go outside, get fresh air, because we'd all been claustrophobic for 38 days with the COVID scare. And he called in the National Guard, and they were walking in the streets saying, light them up for people that were coming outside of their houses. Yet you want to harp on this Trump administration. What a travesty it is that they're actually bringing in law and order to a city that's burning itself down. It's literally burning itself down. I want you to help me make that make sense. I want to get a clear understanding of how any of this makes sense. And you know, guys, I am not even saying, and I've talked about this. I get it that some people are angry because they've talked about, you know, with some of the immigrants that they are deporting. Look, these people have lived here 20, 30 years. They're good members of the community. They're working. And I've heard so many people say, well, there are gardeners. There are a lot more than gardeners. I know that there are a lot of people that are contributing to the community. Okay. And that I'm sure it doesn't feel like a travesty, but nonetheless, this country has laws. And we have laws of the land that you have to follow. And there's ways to go about things. And that's why you're seeing so many immigrants who have come over here and worked so hard to do it the legal way, feeling frustrated. Like, you don't get a get out of jail free card just because you're a good gardener or just because you're working in the community and you have a job. Like, you still have to follow the law. You still have to follow the law. Now, is there room and is there a possibility that there needs to be some reform to make this process somewhat simpler for people? You know, I brought up yesterday that as a country, we'll loan money out for people to go to school. We loan people money for business, all this other thing. Because I said to my husband, I said, let's talk about this for a minute. Okay, Devin, let's just say we as a family of 4, we're living in Guatemala and we wanted to make the best of what we're doing with our children and build a better life for them in America. We want to go to America, and we look into it, and it's like $1,400 for one application, and then you've got airfare and all the things to do it the legal way, so that we're not, crossing rivers with our children and potentially putting them in danger. And we looked, and it said that the average cost was anywhere from $2,000 to $8,000, and could be even more upward of that. And I thought, as a country, the amount of money that has been put into all of this and all of this fight, the millions of dollars that are going to be spent from all of this, why couldn't some of that money be allocated to set up programs for people coming here seeking refuge and asylum and a better life, to go through it the proper channels? If they have this program where maybe it takes 18 months, maybe it takes 2 years, sometimes it's taking them longer than that, but the initial setup for them to do it, to at least start the paperwork so that they are legal while they are here, can be an upfront loan. And when they are here and they are working citizens, they've got so much time to pay that loan back. And if they don't, well, then they get deported, right? You give them an opportunity, because they don't come here. They're escaping poverty. They're escaping war-torn areas. They're escaping situations where they don't have the money. I don't know what the answer is. But I think of all the brilliant people in this country, I would like to think that we could find something else that was much more civilized. But it is hard for me to have compassion when I see these women on here that are like, I'm 17 years old. My parents have lived in this country for 30 years, and I'm frightened because, they're American citizens because they were born here. But now their parents who moved here and crossed over and crossed the border never went through the process. Well, why didn't they become citizens? Was it prevented because they had criminal records? Did it just not happen because they didn't do the legwork and do it because they were getting away with it for so long? So why bother? I don't know. But the opportunity for them to do it is there, and they didn't take it. And it's just the way that it is just being twisted and manipulated. You had millions and millions. There's this sound on TikTok, and I know you all know what I'm talking about, where they're like, if I have to hear that baby screaming one more time, calling for her daddy because the families are being separated. And I think to myself, the only reason you know about that and the only reason that you hear about that right now with Trump is one, because of the society that we live in with the availability to have cameras and cell phones and all the other things. But because people are looking for it, because they have such a hate for him and they can't stand that he's actually doing what he promised he was going to do. But he has, over time, with all the Clinton, Bush, Obama, has deported far less people than all of them. Obama was the king of it. You don't remember the little boy? I mean, literally, think about it. There was so much footage of kids literally in cages. I mean, that's what they were calling them, the cage kids, screaming. But everybody loved Obama. So it didn't get sensationalized back then. If you don't think that there were cries in the hallways of these detention centers when parents were taken away, that's exactly what happened. But you weren't hearing about it, you weren't seeing it, or you were blind to it, or you ignored it. You were ignoring it. But here's the bottom line. If you bring your children into this country and you did not do it in such a way where you sought out refuge, asylum, got the proper paperwork, and you are here illegally, you are going to end up being deported. And one of two things is going to happen. Either your children can stay here with a family member or someone that can care for them, or they're going to get deported with you. That's just the bottom line of what's happening. But either way, whether we don't like the situation, you have to find better ways to find a remedy to this without causing bodily harm, without causing harm to property, and without having these violent riots. These are not protests. This is rioting. They are out there in riot gear because this is not a protest. Protests, when you see people locking arms and blocking a doorway, or singing or doing a sit-in, or there's just a multitude of ways to protest. This was not it. And you're never going to convince me of that. And I don't know why this is something that I don't want us to have to keep talking about. And I've said this, I'm sick and tired of everybody pointing out the obvious. When are we going to get to a place to find resolution? When? Because what we're doing as a country right now is not working. And we're only pitting each other against the other. We are. It's like Christians against non-Christians. Oh, well, if you were a Christian, you would say there is nothing in there that God says just like open the borders for the criminal. I mean, that's not what it says. I mean, it does talk about, there's a very specific verse where he does talk about it. And he does tell us, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself. For you were foreigners in Egypt. I love you. I love your God. I am the Lord your God. And I do believe that that is God's heart. I do believe that we are supposed to love our neighbor. I do believe that we are supposed to be a place for refuge and a place for asylum and a place for peace and a place to give them a safe place to go. Those are not the people that are getting deported. And I know that you say, oh, well, these are people in the community, but there were ways that they were supposed to go about this. So it's not that they're not welcoming them here. But you also, I don't understand the concept why you can't say to yourself, when I listen to that baby scream and everybody's talking about the breaking up of families and everything else, what do you think it was like? Really, what do you think it was like for Laken Riley's family to listen to her fight for her life for 17 minutes in that court? And she's one of many, many, many people. And this process wouldn't be so hard to discern and weed out the actual criminals, like deviant criminals that have been let into our country. But the fact that they were allowed here and the fact that they were let into this country by the previous administration, and you're not mad about that, help me make sense of that. Why aren't you mad about that? Why aren't you mad that an American woman lost her life on a jogging trail? Why aren't you mad that there are other women that have been sexually assaulted? Why aren't you mad that there were thousands, hundreds of thousands of children that came into this country illegally and they're missing? I don't hear any of you fighting for those children. So see, it's that whole matching your energy thing. Do I think that there is a travesty? Do I think that there's people getting swept up in the mix in this? Do I think that there is some confusion? Yeah, it's going to be confusing. There are tens of millions of people that came to this country illegally. There is no court system in the world that could navigate that. And ICE is doing the best that they can, and you're preventing them from doing their job. That's what you're doing. You're hindering them from being able to do their job because you don't like what they're doing. Nobody asked you to like it. And if you want to do something about it and you don't like some of the families that are being removed, help them then. I don't see anyone setting up GoFundMe's. I don't see anyone putting together any kind of foundations like BLM. BLM had $90 million collected within like 18 months. Where is all the collections to help with the legal battles for the families that you so love that work for you and are your gardeners and work in your communities and are doing all the things that they're doing? Why aren't you helping them fight that legal battle? Why aren't you paying and helping them to become naturalized citizens here if that is what the hindrance was, if it was just about money? Because for the ones that have lived here for 20 years, I think that they could have accrued at some point over time $2,000 to $5,000 to make that happen, to become citizens. You got to follow the law. We all have to follow the law, whether we like it or not. And you know, in America, if you do something wrong and you break the law and your children are with you and you get arrested, your children are separated from you. Do you not think that you don't hear cries of children in the foster care system as they're being ripped away from their parents who were drug users or who abused them? Or, I mean, that's a natural order of consequence. All of our choices have consequences. Again, guys, I don't want this to come across as though I don't have compassion for the people trying to come to this country because, like I said, I only get to live here. Look, I said my grandmother's name was Margaret Kelly. She was practically a leprechaun. And at the end of the day, her Irish roots and immigrant family and my great grandparents who came to this country and made a life for themselves. And then eventually my grandmother was born. And then eventually my father was born. And here I am. You know, I get to be an American citizen because I was born here. But they all had to go through that process. They all had to come through Ellis Island. They all had to go and do the things it takes to become a citizen. So instead of burning our cities down and getting pissed at the people that are enforcing the law, why don't we come up with better ways to help them along this process and better vetting programs that help keep out the ones that don't belong here? Because this has never been a matter of we don't want them here. This is not, you know, some lady yesterday was calling me a racist. And I'm like, in no uncertain terms is it about not wanting someone from another country here. I don't want anyone anywhere suffering. And I think if we have the ability to offer them refuge, then we should. But it's got to be done the correct way. That's all. So you guys, I hope next week that I get to come to you with something more fun and lighthearted to speak about. As a country, I hope we get together in prayer and we find a way to bring this all to an end, because the division that is going on between all of us is unnecessary. And I think we have more power than we think to put a stop to it. We are the ones that are engaging in it. We are the ones that are embellishing it. We are the ones that are sharing it. And we are the ones that are making it more relevant. We could immediately shut this down at any given point, but we don't. We don't. We actually encourage it. And I'm not quite sure why we're doing that. So, I mean, I think we all have a little bit of soul searching to do and kind of research that. So anyways, I love you guys. Like I said, let's try to remain fact over fiction. Try to love on somebody today. Find some kindness. And let's not keep encouraging this kind of negativity and division between us all, because back to the 1992 riots and Rodney King, can't we all just get along? That's what I would love. Truth be told, guys.